acknowledging that we're in the country of the Widjabul people of the Bundjalung Nation. I pay respect to their tribal elders, I celebrate their continuing culture, and I acknowledge the memory of their ancestors. I'm just going to go and ask these guys to introduce themselves, starting with Abby, please.
Yep. Hi, I'm Abby. I'm in Year 10 at Lismore High Campus.
I'm Dave Harvey. I'm the Director of Educational Leadership for the Lismore Network, previous Principal of Richmond River High.
Hi, my name's Blake. I'm in Year 10 from Lismore High.
My name's Lachlan. I'm in Year 10 from Kadina High.
My name's Darcy. I'm Year 11 at Kadina High Campus.
So the topic today is media literacy, but we're going to focus on digital literacy from the beginning and how it's different to digital engagement. So these might not be terms that you're 100% used to, but if I give you an idea of what they are, I think you'll all be really familiar. So digital engagement means the people of your generation on the whole would be digitally engaged because it means accessing the internet for things like connecting with friends, socialising and entertainment. So can I just see a show of hands for people who would consider themselves to be digitally engaged? Right, so that's almost all of you. So that means if you have ever accessed Instagram, Facebook or anything like that online to entertain yourselves, you're probably engaged. But there's a difference between engagement and digital literacy. So, and this is a really important difference that we need to look at this morning. So what exactly is digital or media literacy? I just want to ask the panel, for starters, what your understanding of media literacy and digital literacy is.
Yeah, well, I believe compared to digital engagement, which is participation, digital literacy would be being able to understand and know the depths and consequences of actions on the internet. So I think it also broadens to being able to sort through different layers of information and being able to check falsifications from truths, which is really significant in the current internet where stories and fake news can be shared far easier and gains a lot more traction than it used to.
Okay, so if we look at, that's really insightful, thank you Lachlan. If we look at the term digital literacy, if I'm saying to you, I'll just throw this over to this side of the panel, you need to be digitally literate, what does that mean to you, Blake?
Well, to be able to make your own way through different platforms of social media, being able to see what you're doing and able to comprehend what your actions may do, what consequences will you get from doing certain things.
Okay, alright, great. Have you got any thoughts on that that you want to contribute?
Also how we interpret that information and our opinions that we get based off that information and how we live our lives based off what we've seen every day.
Okay, excellent. Darcy, have you got any comments you'd like to make?
Well, it's very easy to be digitally engaged. It's almost a fate. If you are of an age that you are being a teenager, you most likely are digitally engaged. But to be media literate, it's more as well being able to dig up, know where your information is coming from, know whether your information is accurate, how it affects you, how it contributes to you. It's very easy to say digitally engaged, but to be media literate is another thing, and it's sort of a whole other box to unpack.
Yeah, it is, I agree. Okay, so if we just have those thoughts in our heads, I would like to throw some questions out to the audience. I just want to read out a really short definition of media literacy, which says that media literacy is the ability to access, analyse, evaluate and create media in a variety of forms.
Well, I suppose to be that the definition would be right, but that's a very broad way of putting it. I guess it doesn't provide a way that you can be media literate, and I think that becoming media literate, people kind of find quite hard nowadays because we aren't equipped with the devices to be, people don't teach us. We're not taught at school how to tell whether fake news is fake news or whether it's true or what sources are genuine and what aren't, I suppose.
Do you consider yourself to be media literate?
I guess I'm kind of on a wavelength where I believe that I can tell when a news story is fake, but I can't genuinely tell, I can't say it enough to prove to other people that it's fake. I'm not sure, I just sort of on a wavelength where I suppose I'm much like everybody else, where I say that I am, but do I really know that I am?
Okay, that's interesting. What about you, Roland?
Yeah, I personally, I don't own a smartphone. I have no kind of access to that side of the internet. So I get all my news from watching the news at 7 o'clock every night. And so because of that, I feel more media literate myself because I know that I'm getting my information from confirmed, reputable journalism sources.
Yeah.
So I think part of the steps towards media literacy is definitely about analysing the sources you're looking at and to make sure you're going through official and recognised journalism groups.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Ben?
Well, I agree like 100% with the points that were just made, and basically all the points I had in my head. So.
Okay, cool. Abby?
Well, I think being a part of social media and all those other things like Instagram, Snapchat, it is a big influencer. And with your peers that you go to school with, like what you see them put on, you seem to catch on as well and kind of do the same. So images and how you talk and how you respond to things, we're all kind of feeding off each other almost. So it's kind of a trend.
All right, thanks, Abby. I'm just going to ask you, Dave, if you don't mind, just a question about why you think, as an educator, I know you're not a principal now, but why you think media literacy is so crucial in 2018, just from a teacher's point of view.
Well, I think there's a couple of levels there that I see. There's the skills and capabilities in being able to manipulate the media, but then it's an understanding of the impact and perhaps where those sources of information are coming from, to be able to validate the information that's coming every which way in front of us the entire time is a very, very difficult task to do. It's a challenge for all of us, and while I'm not currently on any social media platform, in the past I have found it when I have been a real challenge to know, is this a piece of truth or is this something that's fictitious?
Okay. All right, I'm going to try the audience again.
Hi, my name's Sarah. I get my news usually like a toy from my mother, or I get my news from, for example, the ABC or the SBS, sometimes Times 7. I believe that the news that I'm intaking is truthful because it comes from a reputable source.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, if ABC tells me something that seems half true, I would be mostly inclined to believe that because it does come from a reputable source. So in half, I can't necessarily say that I fully believe that most of the time I know the news that I read is truthful, because I think that's a big part of news, is that you need to be able to question everything that you read or hear or intake.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, that depending on where you're accessing your news, you're more inclined to trust it based on where it's coming from. Thank you for that. Okay. How many people, could I just get hands up if you ever access news on Facebook? All right. So what is your feeling if you're reading a headline on Facebook as opposed to seeing a headline on ABC News or whatever other reputable news source you trust? What is your feeling? Are you looking at those headlines with a different lens, and if so, why? Yeah, Maddie, over here.
My name's Addison, and I choose not to trust the news from TV shows due to they have to make money somehow. They don't really choose to talk about the topics that are less convenient to make money.
Yeah, I think that's...
I personally get my news from YouTube and other Google sources, and multiple sources from different political agendas.
Can you tell me where exactly that you access, where those news sources come from that you access on YouTube?
Most of the time from YouTube channels.
From different YouTube channels?
Just different YouTube channels.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you. Can I just ask some of the teachers in the audience, This is a bit of an open-ended question to you guys, but I'm really interested in how you feel about teaching those skills explicitly to your students in terms of accessing news. Not necessarily media arts as part of the curriculum, but if that's something that you teach your students or think your students need to be taught explicitly. There's a concept that that Australians of this age are digital natives, we call them, and that those skills don't necessarily need to be directly taught, but I'm just interested in hearing your feedback on that.
Hi, my name's Steph Cable-Runch. I'm from Lismore High. I think that although we call them digital natives, there's only a specific type of digital literacy that they're familiar with, and it's very narrow. I specifically teach science, and it's particularly important to make sure that you're referencing your sources from reputable sites. And we specifically and explicitly teach those skills about which sites are reputable and which aren't. Obviously, Wikipedia is a great place to start, but not necessarily a reputable source. So I think we are teaching those skills in some classes, and it needs to form part of what students are learning, because otherwise you're sending students off into the world possibly believing anything that they read on the internet. So it's important to cross-reference sources.
Agree. In biology, we looked up jellyfish stings recently, and I went through a number of what looks like news paper articles on the internet, and they all had different information on how we should treat jellyfish stings, referencing studies that have been done at various universities. And we tried to say, how do we know which one is more reliable or acceptable, because they're all saying different treatments. And then that generated a debate in class about, or just the idea that whenever you're looking up information, you need to keep going back, check if you can you actually find the study that they're referring to in the article.
Okay, so that's really interesting that you went through those sites with your students and talked about how to assess whether it's authentic or not. So I just want to hear again from the students and the teachers what your tools are for deciding whether something is genuine, authentic news, or if it perhaps has a different agenda, or how you can tell, how you can spot fake news, if you see it, or something that's not necessarily newsworthy that's being sold as news.
And I guess that's the concern about having that understanding, is you're saying that what is actually real news and what is relevant and what is meant to be provocative. Certainly at a school level, there are things that we can use where we can block certain websites, or if you're doing research on a particular topic, we set it up so that the students are directed at websites that we know are reliable and have got the reputation and got the information that is of quality.
A lot of our information kind of filtering comes down to common sense, really. You can usually tell if something's a bit more sensationalist than other things. But I don't think there's, usually amongst our generation, there is a clear-cut path that we follow to make sure if things are true or not. If we tend to reference or cross-reference other things. Yeah, it usually comes down to people's common sense, and if they have a feeling that something's not true, rather than a literal concrete kind of decision.
So you're saying that because you're familiar with accessing that stuff, you can intuitively sort of tell if something's being sensationalised, and I guess that's through language and images used.
Yeah, language, images used, quality of the article usually. I think a lot of poorly written kind of clickbait articles, you can immediately tell that they're ridiculous because of spelling errors, formatting errors, you know, poorly constructed sentences and stuff like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We've got one here.
Hi again. So, I agree with everything in that last statement, but I feel like it's also really important to know the importance that English is now, especially through learning how to read what's fake news and what isn't considered fake news, because somebody who doesn't have the English skills or abilities is the same as somebody else might not be able to have those tools, who can dig up, like, even if it's not just simple spelling mistakes, like misleading words and quotes and things like that, other people won't be able to pick up on compared to other people. if they don't have the same English tools as other kids?
I think it's really interesting hearing what the students are saying, particularly Carlo, talking about common sense, and they're saying that common sense isn't actually that common, and common sense, I think, is being often misrepresented in the media, and news is often open to interpretation, and as teachers, we all teach our different areas, and we're actually bound not to get involved in political conversations with students unless it actually meets the curriculum needs. So as an industrial arts teacher, if I'm teaching a woodwork lesson and a student comes in and says, well, I just watched the news, and a lot of what's on the news is, as Ian said, very provocative and politically motivated, then I'm obliged to say, well, look, yeah, okay, and ask some questions and probe, but not actually give my opinion on that. And so it's interesting hearing some of the students saying that they're not actually being explicitly taught to challenge it, when the staff often will ask questions to probe and prompt without putting forward their own opinion.
Due to people generally trusting their political agendas a lot more than other people's political agendas. For example, like people may trust left sources more than right sources, etc., and they may trust each other's sources. So it can be difficulty of navigating which one is true and which one is false.
Yeah. So some of those political parties are seen as more inherently trustworthy, just based
I
on...
wouldn't say that. They've had their own agendas to push forward, and sometimes they make clients.
I'm not really Alexander. I'm not really someone who follows politics, but I do know how to analyse a source. I would generally look at who it's by, how old it is, the medium it's on, who published it, and when it was last updated, that kind of thing. And if you're looking at that, you are going to find a reputable source. The other thing I suppose people fall victim to is how enjoyable it is. We much prefer to watch enjoyable news than news that's informative. And I suppose when it comes to reading stuff, the Facebook headlines are a lot more grabby, they're a lot more sensational, they're not necessarily what we need.
Wonderful, thank you. We're just going to move on to our next session because I'm very mindful of time. Not our next session, sorry, just the next subject that we're going to look at, which is representation in media. And this is generally seen as representation of people is seen as at the heart of media literacy and being able to analyse how people are represented. So I just want us to think about your ability to identify false, misleading or prejudiced representations of people in the media. So that's particularly when I'm talking about things like race and gender and stereotyping. So I guess this is a little bit more of the serious end of the fake news conversation that we've been having. And how stereotypes and prejudice, not only how people are represented, but how that can affect us in accessing the news and how that can influence people's opinions around certain topics. So I just want to start, I might start with you, Abby, if that's okay with you. If you can tell me, and if the audience can start to think about this topic while I'm speaking to the panel, can you think of any examples where you've accessed news or other online or broader media that's been biased or had a specific point of view that you've been able to identify and say, oh, I know what they're trying to do there?
Well, I see racial discrimination as a big one when I watch the news, and especially over the African Americans in America, they're stereotyped to have stigma surrounding violence, and I am media literate, and I see that that's not right. The news shouldn't be pushing that and saying this is how they live, this is what they do. I believe there's more to the other side of the story, and it's quite biased in that form.
All right, great. And what about you, Blake? Have you got any examples that you can think of?
Well, there's like many different examples that you can find within like YouTube, Facebook, because all the news that Facebook shows, some of it is true, some of it can be biased, some of it can be racist. YouTube, there's a channel called Nick G. Basically, it's like they go ahead, they do like biased news on purpose, and it's just the way that they do it. They seem like very racist, but people take it off as being real news, and they're not aware of how to like figure out that that is biased and racist and things like that.
How do you know it's biased?
Well, most of it is obvious,
Yeah.
but from the way that the news account it describes all the news that they're talking about, and they keep going back to all these different points about the same thing. It's just over time.
Okay, that's great. And I want to switch really quickly to ask you guys. Do you know what media diversity means? Is that a term you've heard?
It's a term that I've heard, not one that I'm completely equipped with, but I have a fair idea of using that concept.
All right, okay. And can you guys, just a similar question to what I asked Abby and Blake, thinking, I guess, particularly about Instagram and Facebook, at least in that news here, but when you've accessed any sort of online entertainment or media that has been stereotyped in particular, so less biased, but more of a stereotype of a particular type of person, and if you think you're affected by that.
Well, because I don't access much online media, I probably can't talk too much on that subject, but the internet browser I use does have a clickbait page naturally appear when I go onto new tabs and things. And so I find that some of the news there that appears, I'm not sure if it's biased, but it can definitely show, I think, some stereotypes of people in articles. And I think a lot of news, it might achieve diversity in people shown on the news, but the biases present can influence people's opinions on those news articles. And I think that language that Blake and Stella were mentioning is definitely very important in recognising the bias hidden in an article.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think as human nature, we love news that affects us. We love news that has everything to do with us. We love looking at Instagram pages that relate to us. We love looking at Facebook articles that have something to do with us or our interests. And I believe that, like Stella was saying, to be able to question every single aspect of news that you're looking at, even if you think it's truly reputable, even if you're looking at ABC or you're looking at an article that it comes from a truly reputable site, it's extremely important to be able to unpack that and to know, okay, who is this coming from, who is this aimed at? So when we're hearing what could be false or what could be real news about a person depicted in media, let's say a celebrity or something, to be able to question the bias of the media and to be able to question, is that taken in context? Is that taken out of context? Are we looking at that person for characteristics that they're not fully in control, like their gender, like their race, to really be able to link back and really understand what that article truly is about and not what it is on the surface.
I think that what Darcy mentioned about human nature affecting the way we consume news is very true, because not only are we driven by our desire for entertainment, but we also like convenience. So one of the main ways that people have described being able to identify so-called fake news is by cross-checking, double-checking sources, looking at dates, looking at journalists. And I don't think many people here at all want to take the time out of their day to do that. So that's why that fake news can become so prevalent, because it's not necessarily that some of us might have the skills, but we just don't wish to use them because we're too lazy and we just want a quick fix of news or entertainment.
Can I just say, in terms of traditional media versus online, and I guess I'm posing the question, we've talked a lot about this morning around implications around social media and its use and the challenges that present to us. But I guess we've also been talking around bias in media for quite a long time, and even perhaps prior to social media. So you mentioned that you may access your news, etc., via the TV, perhaps more traditional methods. I guess I just pose the question that are we comfortable with the quality of the news that's presented through those channels as well?
Well, for me, I watch the ABC as my main source of news, and I hear from other people that the SBS is quite good. I don't watch 7 or 9 because of the commercial channels, and I find that the news broadcast on those channels is less news and more entertainment based. I find myself, I don't watch the news every night as I wish to, but I find myself thinking that the news seems appropriate and fair representation. But as Abby said, I think there can be that subtle bias that's hard to perceive about people being represented on the news, but not necessarily in a positive light. So I think that would be the thing for me to go back and start analysing how representation is being used to influence people on their perceived bias towards people.
If we take it back and we look at how news has changed and how people used to gather their news from newspapers and stuff, and how certain people depicted in media, could we go as far to say that sometimes the way we look at bias in media is just a contemporary form of propaganda? Could we just see it? Because we see, to put an example, how everybody likes to have a joke at politicians and to pull them down a little bit, but people like to unload true facts, but then twist them a lot in our media. And then often, where you're finding that is in a reputable media source. So it just comes back to the whole question everything, you know what I mean? But yeah, news, in some format can just be unloaded as a contemporary form of propaganda, a modern way of catching people's eyes and trying to get people to attract to that form of media, so they always go back to that source. Because at the end of the day, media, people who produce media, they have to make the money off it, you know what I mean? So the way that they depict that is going to be in a way that benefits them more than who they're targeting with that.
And it is a big influence. I feel like I'm manipulated by media that I see daily. And as a part of our Unite curriculum that we did, we focused on films and different things, and found that they were biased. So we actually were taught how to look at a film and analyse it and find all the different points that they were pulling, the emotions and all the big headlines and important things out of that film to make us evoke all of our emotions and exercise.
Emotional manipulation has become quite significant, I think, in modern politics. There's a phrase used now called post-truth politics, which is the stage where intelligent discussion, debate breaks down, and the only terms and phrases used to sway someone's opinion are based around emotional control and emotional suggestion. This doesn't necessarily happen all the time in Australia, but the big one, of course, is America and Donald Trump. He has a habit of not responding or rebutting a point against his government or his ideologies. He will instead try and reaffirm his already stated point, dismiss the other, and try and use emotion and inspiring oratory in order to convince people of his abilities and his policy, as opposed to intelligent debate.
Okay, thanks guys. I'm just going to throw out to the audience now just to think broadly about what we were talking about there with stereotypes, particularly with gender. Can I just see a show of hands as who's got an Instagram account? Alright, awesome. So every single person with their hand up should be able to comment on that in some way. Can I just get some hands up, please, if there are any comments or questions from teachers or students?
Alexandra again. I really notice that if we're looking at this whole scenario in particular, we've got to remember, and it's a sad fact, who is running the news business, and at the end of the day, it's middle-aged white men who are very wealthy. And whilst that's sad, it's very true. And I think they're looking at others as if they're subjects and not necessarily as something we can, convey the news for in its true nature. And the hot topic at the moment in that respect is terrorism and identifying the entire Muslim population as terrorists, when we really know that pretty much like the rest of us. And you know, it's very specific in the news, I suppose. When something happens, they generally have to identify that this person is Muslim. And I think that's very sad.
I feel that news on TV is a lot more accurate than news on social media and Facebook and stuff, because the news on TV, like you can't comment or do anything, whereas news on Facebook, you can, share it and, change it and post it to something different than what it's saying, whereas news on TV, it's just, you see it and you can't change what it means, it's just being said. Yeah.
In response to Kat's statement, I agree heavily. Also with TV, it gets filtered a lot through officials, whereas on social media, journalists can publish anything and it doesn't really go through that filter of truth or false statements. And again, with the commenting, anyone can comment and have their own opinion, whether it's biased, true or false. Yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah. All right, guys. That brings us to the end of the first session. I'm really, really grateful to you all for contributing to that. That's really fantastic. We didn't even get time to go through all of our questions. Can you please put your hands together for our experts?
Hi everyone, great to have you all here today. Obviously continue on our discussion about media literacy. We're going to kick off the second session by recapping a little bit the idea of media education in schools, but digging a little bit deeper to see exactly how that's happening and whether it's that important. Just to set the scene a bit, a recent review of the Australian curriculum by the Federal Department of Education and Training has recommended actually doing away with media arts as a curriculum subject. They argue that media arts skills aren't adequately covered already in English, in technology, and ICT skills should be covered in general capabilities requirements. So I've just forgotten to get everybody to introduce themselves. So we're going to start with Lily.
I'm Lily from Kadina High Campus.
You're year 10 as well, is that right?
Year 11.
Year 11, okay.
Hi, I'm Ross from Lismore High. I'm year 11.
Okay. I'm David Seal, by the way. I'm also from the ABC's engagement team.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm in Year 11 and I'm from Kadina High Campus.
I'm Steph Coble-Runch, a teacher in science at Lismore High.
I'm Daisy and I'm from Lismore High and I'm in Year 9.
Great. Thanks so much, all of you, for coming up today and volunteering to be part of this panel. So going back, obviously it's a question that the Department of Education and Training has. Should we continue to teach media arts to our students? So I'd like to throw that, perhaps we could start even with Mrs. Stephanie, okay, and ask you, what do you think about that?
I actually think it would be really disappointing to do away with media arts. I think it's, my husband actually studied media arts at uni and he's now a cameraman for Channel 9, so I think it's a particular pathway that some students would really like to take, and although it is covered in other curriculum areas, it's not focused on as much as some students may choose to do if it is their career path. So it would be disappointing to lose that aspect to schooling because you need diversity in the curriculum.
Can I just have a show of hands? Are any of you guys out there actually learning media arts or have learnt in your studies? Any yes? No. So it sounds like it's not being taught, and it is being taught through other disciplines. We had a biology teacher earlier, in fact, explaining how she was teaching, I think, how to dissect news and information through a biology exercise. So there are different ways. What about you guys? Do you think it's important? I'll throw that to you, Lily.
I think it is important that we learn those skills, but at the same time, I'm not sure if people are really taking them in a lot, because I feel like, because we've grown up with it, we automatically assume that we know more sometimes, then the people who may be teaching it to us, we feel entitled that we should maybe be teaching it because we know more about it than they do, so that impacts negatively on the people teaching it. And we decide that we don't need to do that class because we already know what we need to know.
Right, so it brings us back to that concept that we were talking about earlier of digital natives, and that you've grown up understanding perhaps the context a little bit better. Are there any teachers out there who can explain whether they've ever taught it, or what is involved in the subject, or what sorts of things are being taught? Is there anybody who can give us a bit of a perspective of what media arts means? No, and maybe the principles, or no? Okay. What about you, Daisy? Do you think it's important?
Yeah, of course I think it's important. I think I agree with what Lily was saying about we think that we are already very media literate, but it still needs to be taught. Just because we can use the media doesn't mean we know how to take it. But maybe because it's such a thing that is part of every other subject as well, maybe it should be, and because nobody's really choosing it, as is shown by the lack of hands put up before, maybe it's better if it's taught in, as part of every subject, because it can be connected with every subject, and you need to use the media to, for your assignments in every subject, like the teacher was saying before.
Right, so, and what about the media production skills, actually how to create media and develop it? Have you had any teaching around that at all, Emily?
Well, a recent assignment that I just did actually for ancient history was we had to create a video analysing sources from Persepolis, and it actually built up a lot of my skills in the making videos, how to edit them, how to make everything well-timed, and how to make it all fit. But, I don't really know.
So that was in a history class?
Yeah, that was in a history class. And I was actually, I was in Miss O'Sullivan's biology class when she was doing that. And I kind of agree. If we do get a piece of everything in every class that we have, that was really useful because she taught us how to say, we were looking at something from the New South Wales ambulance side. And so we're like, well, is this up to date? Where's the date on this? Can we, even though it is from a reliable source, can we actually look at this and say, that's very reliable just because it's from that source? It could be out of date. So we had to look at all of that, and it was, we've just been taught this really through multiple subjects.
Okay, interesting. Is there anyone out there who could tell us about some of the subjects that they're doing, or they have production skills, or they're learning to produce media, but not necessarily in media arts? Are there any examples that anybody can give us? See any hands? Anybody producing videos or radio or sound? So, yeah.
You know me.
Is that Darcy?
Yes.
Yeah.
In English, we learn it so much. It's like a foreground of everything we do. Knowing exactly where everything's coming from, knowing how to analyse it, how to unplug it, how to know where it truly comes from. But I believe that teaching it is far more important than what we really put on, because our internet, our media, it has a tendency to update so fast, so quickly, and it's not something that we really can just cover in a few lessons and then go, well, you guys know it now. You know what I mean? It has to be revisited again and again and again for us to really understand it, because yes, we have been, we are Generation Z, is that it? And we have grown up surrounded by media, but I don't believe that we know even half of what we're looking at. You know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you. Ross, what do you reckon? Have you had to produce a website, or have you had to produce media yourself, and have you thought about that process in any of your classes that you can think of?
Well, I haven't really produced a website or done,
as an example,
done anything recently with the media. But,
Oh, that's okay. Maybe, is there anybody else on the panel who might have?
I was just going to follow on from what Darcy was saying, is because it is updating so frequently, most of the sources we have access to are actually out of date. So the programs we're using may become irrelevant in a couple of years, and so it just doesn't feel like we're actually learning something that we can continue with, almost.
When you're talking about producing media because the programs are becoming irrelevant so quickly.
Yeah, and with what Emily was saying as well, with creating a video site, I feel as though sometimes the sites we have access to that are free may not give us the best result. So the people who have the money to be able to afford sites that will produce better outcomes are given better results because theirs looks better, but it's really just because they're using a different site that may make those outcomes easier.
Right, okay. What about, do you think, and I'm going to throw this to you again, Daisy, do you think that if you do have production skills and you do understand how to create the media, if that's through English or your history class or biology, do you think you can be more media literate? Does that help you in your process of analysing and contextualising information?
Yeah, I mean, I think the definition of media literate you had to be able to create media as well. And I mean, like, everyone's creating media every day when, like, they go onto their Instagram accounts, and, like, so creating a video is just part of that. So I think if you know how you create a video, and then you know, like, you have to get your sources from somewhere, you understand, like, how those people, like, who are creating the news, like, they get their sources as well, and yeah.
And you start to understand that news gathering process and how you actively choose
and how you filter,
who you include in
what
it,
you're...
and the kinds of representations which we were just talking about. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Stephanie?
I think students learn the most when we force them to try to persuade others. So when we force them to use the skills of being persuasive in whatever task it is, that makes them understand more easily the kind of terms that might be used, or the kind of music that might be used, or the imagery that might be used, and therefore they can start to pick up on that when they're watching it online or when they're watching it on TV. They can start to see some of the tools that they use themselves in the information that they're viewing.
Okay, great. And I just wanted to throw a question out to any of the teachers again out there. How do they feel? Do they feel that media arts and the production of media literacy should be treated more generally across all subjects, or should it retain its own subject in the curriculum, have its own space? I don't know if that's something that you can comment on or give us a bit of insight. Is there anybody out there? Any teachers? No, teachers are shy as well today.
I think it should be both.
Right.
I think it should be within the curriculum, but it also should be a separate subject. As I said, my husband studied it. His high school had a great production area. He didn't realise it was his passion until he did it as an elective in years 9 and 10, and that's ended up being his career path. So as I said, I think diversity is really important for curriculum, and it would be disappointing because it's not just all about referencing sources, it's about creating products, and some students are fantastic at that, and it would be disappointing to limit those students not being able to achieve that.
Sorry, Emily,
I think that's a good point, because a lot of our subjects, by teaching us just this small, it gives us like a base to build up on. So if we do enjoy it really well, we can then choose and go down that career path and really excel in it. Like in English, bringing up school again, sorry. We actually, our first assignment in year 11, we had to build a website and put all of our work into making it aesthetically pleasing, making it run like as a website, making it so that people would want to go onto this and read our work and look at what we've studied. And I think that's a really good baseline to then go into, say, the media and creating all of this. It just, I have to agree. You have to be able to teach it in other subjects as a baseline to then have the choice to go into a career.
Yeah, also I think because we're living in an era where you have traditional and non-traditional media, and we've touched on a lot of those different other kinds of sources that people are using, YouTube, just Google, setting up your own websites. It's a time when potentially there's a lot more ease of access into the media. So perhaps that's something to think about. I'm going to keep things moving because we are on a little bit of a...
Mine's not really a question, it's more of a comment.
Right.
It's about what you're talking about in terms of media. I think we should put the word media aside. And the
Could you just introduce yourself?
Oh, my name's Sue, and I'm from Cadetta Campus. I think there's three key words. The first is representation, and the other key words are critical literacy. And unless we teach kids to be critical thinkers and to understand how all those techniques are used to represent ideas, then kids aren't going to be able to understand. And I think that goes across all key learning areas. I think it's the responsibility of all educators to teach representation in their area and the critical literacy skills they need to be able to use to unpack that. In terms of media arts that you're talking about, I think we actually do run courses, and we actually run one at our school called Entertainment, which actually covers the sorts of things that you're talking about. So it's probably the terminology of media arts in terms of the national curriculum, and in the New South Wales curriculum there is that course, Entertainment, which is the vocational education course which is run, as well as, I don't know whether or not you would consider music and drama to fit under those arts courses as well, because they're run as discrete subjects.
Right. Is there anybody who studies what you learn in entertainment?
Well, that was it. Sorry. In entertainment, we learn about lighting and setting and a lot of sound operating and how to operate a stage and a mixing desk and how to do shows and performances. Yeah.
Okay, alright, so it doesn't really touch on the news production side of things, it's more specifically on entertainment and staging and...
Yeah, I also did a course, so I'd say it more fits under creative and performing arts.
Okay.
So...
Okay, great.
I find it interesting that we're talking about entertainment to do with the media, because the news is media, and news is meant to be like information, but it's kind of turning into entertainment, and also because the big companies want people to be entertained by this so that they can get more money from advertising, and so it's important to them that their viewers are entertained, and it becomes less important that their sources are reliable and that they're telling you the most important things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The commercial pressures on media often can lead to those sorts of outcomes, can't they? I'd like to keep things... Is there anyone else who had a comment about that at all from the audience? If not, I'd like to... Oh, yep. Sorry.
Hi, it's Olivia. This might be a dumb question, but I think a lot of people are confused of whether you're talking about media arts or another type of actual art or entertainment arts, so I was wondering if you could clarify that.
Yeah, I think you have to ask the Department of Education and Training, but they're considering media arts, and it sounds like there are a few interpretations here of that. And I'm not actually a teacher, but if somebody wants to answer that as a teacher, I think we sort of went down that path a little bit, but I don't know if we can clarify. At any rate, I am going to, sorry, I'm not the person to answer that, and I can't see that anybody else is going to. I'm going to keep moving along. The second part of what we'd like to discuss today is regarding data privacy. Obviously an issue where we're living in a world which is data-driven. Smartphones, tablets, laptops dominated. You guys are online everywhere you go, unless you don't use a smartphone like Lachlan, and you opt out. It's increasingly difficult for us to track who has our information, how that's being used, in what ways. So it is an ongoing challenge, not only for our regulators and our lawmakers, but also for us as digital citizens, as consumers of information, to work out the best ways to protect ourselves and our privacy and monitor who is using that information. Earlier this year, data privacy became a very hotly debated issue in Australia and around the world, thanks to a big scandal involving Facebook. No doubt a lot of you were familiar with it. I'm just going to ask, Lily, you understand what happened there. Can you tell us a little bit what happened earlier this year?
There was a major company corporation called Cambridge Analytica. And what they did was they said that they were researching for scientific purposes. So by Facebook standards, that automatically granted them more access to our information. So then they post themselves as a personality quiz kind of thing. You've seen on Facebook, you can fill them out, lots of your friends do it. But under the terms and conditions, it gave access to not only lots of your data, but lots of your friends' data.
Right.
So they essentially acquired heaps of information, although I think it was only 200,000 or so did the quiz.
In Australia, around 300,000 Australians were affected, but worldwide, 87 million users. Information was downloaded or shared.
I think it was only that 200,000 actually did the quiz, but that was the number of people affected because they went through their friends and were able to access all of their friends' data as well as the people who had actually done the quiz. So it seems people who hadn't consented to giving away their data and information.
Who were also affected. So essentially, yeah, what we saw was a third party, somebody that you don't necessarily, that you haven't provided or given your consent to, gaining information about your habits, what you like, what you don't like, and then using that generally for various purposes. So I just wanted to ask some of the people on the panel, what sorts of personal data do you think you're sharing online when you're browsing or you're maybe Daisy? Did you want to give some ideas there?
I don't have any social media, but I am aware when I'm on the internet, like cookies, for example, they use like what you've been looking at to advertise, and I think that's really dangerous. Like I understand what they're trying to get at, like they're trying to advertise to the right people, the right things, but you just need to be aware that the websites that you're visiting can be tracked, and they are being tracked, and yeah, it can be dangerous.
Can anybody give us an explanation of what does everyone know what a cookie is? Show of hands if you know what a cookie is. Does anyone want to try and tell us what they think it is or what it might be? Anyone, any tech experts? Darcy?
So a cookie is like a footprint that you have put onto the internet. So by something that you're browsing, you're kind of creating a bit of a pathway. So every time you, let's figuratively walk through the internet and go through something, you're leaving behind something called cookies, and they have access to implement and set in stone that data for future browsings, and so it's documented, and so it can be used for your future.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're absolutely right. And they can make your web browsing experience sometimes more easier because you navigate much more quickly through sites, but they also are storing information and important information which can be used. What other sorts of things can anybody? I'm going to throw the questions out to the audience. What sorts of other things can you think of that we might be sharing online or providing?
Experiment that by a lot of YouTubers, I think. What they've been doing is they've been linking their phones over to Google and saying their words. And what actually happens is that the phone will actually record their voice and give them targeted advertising towards that. And that can be quite dangerous in certain scenarios. Given what the backstory you're talking about, it could also be threatening to the person or make them feel sad because maybe someone just died in their family and comes over to you.
Right, so that's an example. So voice activated or recording of voice. Is that something that people have heard of? Is that, yeah?
Yeah, that actually happened to me personally. It was a bit weird. It was just, my parents recently got back from holiday and they were just talking about how the pool looked kind of green and things like that. It was just nothing, conversation basically. And then I was just scrolling through YouTube, just watching videos, and Bunnings ad for pool cleaner came up.
Wow, okay.
it was a bit freaky.
Okay, has anybody else got any examples of that where they've seen, they've been looking for some, or they've been doing a certain kind of a search, or down the, okay, and then just down the front.
These guys did an experiment with dog toys. They cleared their history browser and reinstalled it, and then they opened it up and they just started talking about dog toys for an hour or so. And then they went into basically sites which give you advertisements, and every single ad about there was about dogs and dog toys.
Right. And just down the front here as well.
Yeah, I was looking online, looking for a guitar online, and I was looking at a specific model of guitar, and then probably 30 minutes later I went on YouTube, and all the suggested videos happened to be Fender Stratocaster review or Gibson Les Paul review, and it was all these guitar reviews, all these gear reviews that I didn't necessarily want.
So did you consider that to be beneficial, or did you find it a bit weird?
Yeah, I thought it wasn't beneficial or negative in any way, but I thought it was strange that immediately, or close to immediately after searching for something very specific, I was targeted with other specific ads. Even though I use ad blockers and I turn off cookies when I can.
Right, okay, well that's interesting. So you can actually opt out of a lot of these things, so cookies, different options there. Lily, what about you? Do you think that it's something beneficial that you're being offered these sorts of ads about something you may be interested in, or do you find it?
I'd say some of them would be beneficial. Like, for example, if you type in a location in Google Maps and then it comes up with things around you that you might like to do, that can be beneficial. But most of the time, it just feels like an invasion of privacy and that you're not being respected.
Absolutely. So we've spoken a little bit about some of the way companies market and use your information to market products and services. What's another possible reason why they might be collecting information? Sorry, we've got a comment up the back here.
Pages. So it's particularly how your Spotify history can change as a parent, and you're putting quiet music on at home to try and put your child to sleep, and it ruins your playlist because that so it's slightly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is the same sort of process at work there. Yep, down the front here.
It was just a comment, not but
Sure.
I feel like a lot of people don't really understand how easy it is to access all the data. Like me personally, I have Instagram, Snapchat, and sometimes, like I think about posting stuff because I know, like, or anything I, do, it can be accessed so easily, even, if you delete stuff. I just feel like a lot of people, there's like a lot of people don't realise that it's so easy to access, just really easy to access.
Absolutely, no, you're right, and even things that you posted and you then take down, there's a record of that, so nothing really is 100% safe or secure. What about the belief which is out? Oh, sorry, is there another comment down there at all? Yeah.
I just had a really good example that my legal studies teacher was talking about actually. He sort of says that we are led to believe that us on the internet with Facebook are actually a customer, but we're more the product because our information is sold. And something interesting that Facebook did, which is quite, I would say, pretty illegal and immoral, was that if you were putting up sad content, or if you were saying like, how are you feeling, or I'm feeling sad, then they would purposely show you things that would make you happy, and I believe that, and the reason why they did that is so that you would come straight back onto Facebook and it would give you that level of happiness that they want you to feel to come back onto, so.
Oh, okay, that's interesting, yeah. I think we've got another comment over here.
I was just going to say that personally, I feel is that when I'm getting targeted by these type of advertisements, I think they're quite beneficial, even though they are invading my privacy. But in all circumstances, when you sign up for a website, you go through a privacy thing, which most people don't read, which you probably should. But you basically give them the right to your information and everything in that. They can basically say they're going to sell your organs in that, and you don't read it. But yeah, I think it can be unethical in some some circumstances, like what Darcy was just saying about being sad and it comes up with slightly tabby things, it's trying to make you crack the science. It can be unethical.
I think you're absolutely right. Do we have the option to opt out in many cases because you're being asked to sign these terms and conditions very often to download an app that you might need for your day-to-day work or for your... So that does pose questions about how you actually manage your own information. I just wanted to put it out there, and this is a common belief in society that young people don't really care about their privacy that much, that they don't, that it's not something that they're concerned about, and you've grown up having in the digital age, so you're not as concerned as maybe older generations. Can I just have a show of hands? I just want to get a sense of who does not like the idea of their personal information being held and maybe shared between big organisations? Is that, who doesn't like it? Okay. Okay, right. And is there anybody who's not particularly concerned about that? I mean, as young people, and feel free, yeah, okay, feel free to do that, okay. So, I'm just interested because obviously a lot of us feel like it is of concern, but I'm going to go back to you, even though we have heard quite a bit from you. Why is it not of concern to you?
It's not as concerned to me because I generally find that it's quite helpful stuff. Like, sure, sometimes it can be unethical, but half the time it's very helpful because you'll be searching something out on certain people, and then maybe an hour or two later you kind of decide, and it just pops up on YouTube all these reviews about stuff, and you can watch them. And it can be quite helpful, and it doesn't really concern me about what they do with my data, considering I do sign up to them and I say that they can do whatever the hell they want with my data.
Is there anybody on the panel who has a different opinion about that? Yeah, really? Would you like to?
I say so because, for example, recently I had my cousins over and she's really into My Little Pony, and so she asked to borrow my computer, and so she just filled my whole thing. So for weeks after that, all that was in my recommended was My Little Pony toys and things like that, things that I personally wasn't super interested in. So would you say that's still beneficial, or is like...
I guess that's a grey area. I mean...
Because if you misclick or anything, it's there, they have it.
I find the whole thing a bit disconcerting, and I think it's really hard for teenagers to foresee how their information being shared now is going to impact them as an adult. Different career paths, that information may become available to media sources later, and if you decide to go into politics or you decide to go into teaching or some other avenue where that information could be used against you, it's a bit difficult, and as an adult even, I find it quite challenging. So as a teenager, when you're not thinking that far ahead, I think it's a difficult answer to come up with now.
Yeah, and I think it also brings us to the idea of the age of digital consent, which is something which is different in different countries, depending on different social media. But for example, the European Union, a lot of the countries have just introduced 16 as the age of digital consent, so you wouldn't be able to have an Instagram account or a Facebook account until you were 16 years of age. In the US and the UK and Ireland and here in Australia, it's generally around 13. Do you guys have any opinions on that? Ross, maybe? What do you think?
Well, at a young age, when you sign up to like these social media, you don't know what you're doing, and you kind of put all your sort of information out there for people to like kind of grab and use to manipulate you to do things you would not normally do. And I think having it set at like 16 makes, because you're more, I guess, known to the digital world than if you're younger.
Yeah, so it can have consequences potentially later in life, which is what Stephanie was talking about, and maybe you're a bit young. Do you have any other opinions there, Emily?
Well, when I did turn 13, all of my friends, they had Facebook already, and so I had to have a long discussion with my parents about whether I was allowed to get Facebook, because they're very concerned with privacy, and they knew they had concerns about me being 13 and being on the internet, and so every piece of social media, anything that I put up there, it had to be on a private account, only my friends could see it, only all this. So I think I'm kind of glad that they do have an age limit, and that I'm not sure about where it should sit, but it really did help, because now I'm not putting out things that I wouldn't want people to look up when I'm older, or for anyone to see. Like, if I'm putting it out there, it's not something that I'm not proud of. So.
Did you want to add something there, Dave?
Yeah, I feel like some people think, oh, I don't mind if people have my personal data because I'm not doing anything on my social media that I wouldn't want anyone else to see. But then, like, for example, if you have social media when you're 10 years old and you're like, I don't know, you have different interests, and then like 10 years later, that data's still there about what you like were interested in. Like, it could be My Little Ponies, you know?
Absolutely.
Going on with that age, I know heaps of people that when they were 10, 11, 12, just lied about their birthday and then got into Facebook. Like,
right, so how can it be policed?
Exactly.
Yeah, which is very difficult. In fact, it's interesting, but the majority here thought it was that they would be concerned about their information being shared. That is what Australians think more generally. Just as last year, the Australian Information Commission ran a survey which showed that 86% of Australians actually believe that secondary use of personal information, your information being on-sold to other companies, was a misuse of personal data. Now, the Australian Privacy Act is the piece of legislation that regulates all of that, and in the privacy principles, which is part of that legislation, number 7 prohibits the practice, the practice which we've discussed. However, it's not legally binding, so companies are left to self-regulate their use of personal data, and it just gives you an idea of how we're still trying to grapple with the best way to legislate and control some of these activities. Just moving right along, because I am aware that we are getting towards the end of this session, and I just wanted to go to the last topic, which is personal safety, which links into privacy, and just talk a little bit about how you guys do make sure that your privacy is protected online. Are there certain things that you don't do or do? Are there rules that you follow when you're in social media, when you're chatting with your friends, when you're sending photos, all that sort of thing? Did everybody want to make any comments about that?
If it was up to me, I wouldn't have a Facebook account at all. I wouldn't want to have that, but because...
That's right. Who has a Facebook account here? Okay, right. Because people say also that younger generation isn't using Facebook, but I see that they are, but maybe they're changing the way that they're using it. So you wouldn't have a Facebook?
No, not if I could avoid it, but it's so genuinely accepted. Like, you have to have Facebook to go to, say, events. There'll be a school event and they might post it on Facebook. And in order to know about these things, you have to have an account. And it's kind of frustrating that that's one of our only medias for things such as that. Like, we have a school account on Facebook, and it's frustrating that some teachers will use it to give information, but not all of us use Facebook or willingly use Facebook, and I only have it as an account to connect with my friends because that's what I need. If I didn't have it, I'd be completely out of the loop. I'd have no idea what was going on, and it would just mess up a lot of things.
Yeah.
Did you want to add to that, Louie?
I was going to say that often these Facebook groups that we are basically forced to be a part of, otherwise it's an inconvenience to not only ourselves but everyone else around us. They're not open groups, so you need an account to be a part of them because they're closed groups, so they need to check that you're part of that because they don't want other people that aren't part of the school or part of your year to see these things that you're being told, like it's excursion today or things like that. They don't want anyone to be able to access that. But sometimes it is a bit of an inconvenience because if you did want to get rid of it, it's an inconvenience to not only yourself but everyone else, and they don't have a way to contact you.
Right, yeah, so being forced to kind of enter into those media because everybody's using them. Has anybody, I'm going to throw this out to the audience, has anyone ever had a personal safety issue arise because of their sharing online, because they've been...
Yeah, when you're talking about personal safety, not my own personal safety, but my little one's. So I often like to have a sleep in on the weekend, and he manages to bribe me and says, "Dad, can I use your phone?" And I know that generally I'd get another half an hour out of it if I do that. But I went down the other day and he said, "Oh look, I'm checking out my mate's YouTube channel." Now my son's 6, and his mate's YouTube channel consisted of teaching other kids how to play Warcraft. And I said, "Well, you're not doing that, mate." And he said, "Well, can I leave a like?" And I said, "No, you're not leaving a like. You're not leaving a geotag track or whatever anywhere in relation to this." But I do wonder about how this other little bloke, you know, obviously he's done that with his parents' permission, and he's put himself out there to some older players potentially, and put himself in quite a vulnerable position.
Probably one of the worst things with privacy is being hacked, getting your Facebook account hacked. It's happened to me before, and you know, it can spread a lot of bad things doing that. Anyway,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's one of the most common forms of your privacy being invaded. What sorts of, do anyone think of any strategies or things that can be done to stop that happening? Are there any steps that we can take? Let's go down the front here.
My name's EJ. One way to deal with it is if you just go on incognito mode, then nothing can get tracked.
Okay.
It's all G.
Good. Okay. Oh, yeah, over to the left, I think. Yes. Oh, yes, hi. Sorry, I couldn't see you.
Alexandra again. My question is, if we're being virtually stalked and everything is on the internet these days, when can we as students draw the line? If we're children, does that mean our parents have to stop it, or does that mean for adults there has to be some kind of law or rules and regulations?
As a parent and a teacher, so I've got a daughter that's 22, and she had a lot of issues in terms of social media, just understanding what she should and shouldn't put out there. And I've also got a 10-year-old, and I'm very conscious of the photos, especially imagery that gets put up, and then the information that goes along with that imagery. And especially as teachers as well, we're very conscious of not putting images and student full names in the same location. Just maintaining that level of privacy on behalf of those people that are in our care.
So could you give us any of the strategies that you maybe discuss as a teacher or parent to help young people?
So with my 10-year-old daughter, when we're uploading photos, it's usually never a full frontal facial picture. We'll, you know, if we're using Snapchat, we'll put a filter over it or whatever. Or we may only show half of our faces or the side of our face. We would never we never geotag anything, so people don't know the location that we're at. As a teacher, again, you're very conscious of, firstly, those students who don't want their images out there, or their parents have requested that their images are not put into social media. But then again, making sure that perhaps the year group and the student name isn't in the same thing, so that people who do have bad intentions can't access our students in a negative way because we put that information out there. So schools are very conscious of that.
Yeah. I think we're coming to an end here. I'd like to thank everyone, particularly my fantastic panelists up here. Discussion is interesting, and we hope to see you all again soon. Thanks very much.